Hi everyone, my name is Mikey Bronowski and I would like to introduce you to AutomatedLab, the PowerShell module that helps you to create the labs in your own environment, on your PC, on your laptop, on your server or Azure subscription. AutomatedLab can create VMs on Hyper-V on Azure. That's I'm going to show you today. And here's the main website of the project, including the documentation, examples, samples, and guides how to start, how to install that. So I invite you to check the website and explore different things, different scenarios, different labs they propose. But first, you need to install the module. There are two supported ways to install the module. First would be the MSI installer, which will be published on GitHub. And you have the guide here. So basically download an app, the installer, and go next. The installer will be on GitHub. So when you go here, you get to see the releases. And the other supported way to install, that would be PowerShell Gallery. So when you go to PowerShell Gallery, you have the AutomatedLab here. And since they release the versions really frequently, more of like a preview versions, you can see that 3 days ago, 8 days ago, 10, 11, it's not always the main version that's released. It might be the pre-release. So if you want to use one of these preview versions, you have to use, so note this, it's just like install module, name AutomatedLab required version. But if you want to use one of the preview, you have to add the allow pre-release. Why you want to use preview? For instance, in my case, in one of the older versions, there was an issue in the main version that was fixed in one of the previews. So I was using the preview for a while until it was released in the next version. So, and since it's being it's actively developed and the authors are working on that frequently, it might be sometimes a good idea to use preview. The project repo is on GitHub. You can see the GitHub AutomatedLab main site. It has multiple repositories, and here's the main repository for AutomatedLab. Here are the key people of the project. So if we open them, it's Jan-Hendrik Peters and Raymond André, MSFT. That means they are Microsoft employees, and that's kind of a side project for them. If you have any questions, if you have any issues or ideas for new features, just go to AutomatedLab, raise an issue, and work with the authors. They were pretty responsive, and yeah, it's really good way to get in touch with them, and if you have any information about the module. So let's go back to the installation. You can install that either on Linux or MacOS or Windows. I will show you the Windows version, but first a few options to remember. The AutomatedLab collects some statistics for the purpose of the module. for presentation, you can disable that. You don't have to send these statistics to the module creators. So AutomatedLab telemetry opt-in, set false, and that will stop sending any statistics. And the other thing that's crucial to the module is the lab sources structure. So when you install that on your local folder, you will have a lab sources folder structure like that, where there are some custom roles that are shipped with the module, ISOs that will be empty unless you put something there. In my case, that's the OS ISO and SQL Server ISO, and some other stuff like tools. This folder, when you configure the VM, the lab, it can be copied to your guest. But that's locally on your machine. But you can also have these sources synchronized when you are using Azure environment. So you can synchronize your local lab sources with the Azure subscription. And there are the module offers 3 configurations. You can either disable the auto sync and just forget about this, but if you have this, you can define the interval in days. I think it's 60 or 50 days by default. That will check, and the lab sources max file size MB means that by default it's 50 megabytes. So anything that's smaller than 50 megabytes will be synchronized. But again, you can disable the whole synchronization, and it won't synchronize to your Azure subscription. And where it will be synchronized. So when you go to your Azure portal and you find the when you first deploy your lab to Azure, you'll find that there is a new resource group that's called AutomatedLab sources. Under that, you will find the storage account, and in the storage account you have a file share of the folder lab sources, and if you have anything synchronized, it will be there. Perfect. So we know how to install that. Now let's see a simple example of how the module works. The creators claim that you can create a fully functional VM within 3 lines, and that's true. You can create a simple lab with 3 lines of code. So what you need to do? First, remember, but by default the credentials to your new machine, your lab, will be administrator/install. On my local Hyper-V, it seems like administrator is the user, and on Azure, install would be the user, and the password would be SUMPASS1. That's the default. In the next example, I will show you that you can change that. So the 3 steps. You need the new lab definition. So you need to create the container for your lab. It requires a name and the virtualization engine. In my case, Hyper-V. Let's run this. If it's already running in your environment, if you are working with AutomatedLab for a while, it will be quick because it doesn't have to load the module. But it was okay, it was 9 seconds, so it wasn't too bad. Now, the second step would be to define the VM within your lab. So it requires the name. You can set up the RAM value for the VM and operating system, and it has to be available in your sources. So let's run this. It's not creating the VM yet. It's just creating the definition of the VM. And the next step is to install lab. You can either leave that with the no parameters and it will perform the validation, that means pester tests at the end of the installation, or you can just skip the validation and perform the tests after all, just tests. So run this and it will run, as you can see on the screen, between 3 and 5 minutes. It all depends on the speed of your machine and if you have enough RAM or CPU and so on and so on. On my machine it will be 3-5 minutes, somewhere in this range. While it's running, we can have a look at the other place for our guest. It will be Azure. As it won't be 3 lines this time, despite me saying that this 3 is here, but I'm actually lying here a bit. The first line is to define the new lab in the Azure environment. So let's open a new session and define this new lab. And since I open a new session, it will again take some time to load the module to the new session. But if I did this on the first session, it would be quite fast. Now, the second line is to add the subscription. So that's different comparing to the first example, because I need to add the details about the subscription, Azure subscription. So I'm going to add the subscription with a default location of UK South. And that will take a while. It just connects to the Azure. So beforehand, I used connect-az account, and I got a prompt to log in, to put my credentials to Azure. So I logged in and it's saved in the session. So I can use all the commands from AZ module from Microsoft to operate in Azure. Now, similarly to the other example, we need to define the machine, and it's the same, but this time I don't need the sources to be available. It will use the sources that are available by the module creators. So I don't have the operating system anywhere in Azure. And kick off the installation. Let's see if our Hyper-V machine is done. It completed. Perfect. And we can see, yes, it was almost 4 minutes, something like that. And in my Hyper-V manager, I can see that there is my machine and it started. And it's just simplest empty OS Windows Server 2022 without any other tools applications. In the meantime, when the Azure one is running, it might take again 3-5 minutes, depend on the Azure how busy it is. We can go to resource groups and see there's this resource group called 3 lines A. That's exactly the name of my lab, and it created all these objects. I didn't have to define anything, network, disk, anything like that. It just creates that for me. So it's very simple. And then here's my VM, and it's not ready yet, but when you want to connect to the VM at the end, you can just use the public IP address. One thing to remember, you have to use the load balancer public IP and the port number 5001. But you don't have to necessarily go to portal to see all the information. You can get these details about the Azure machines using commands from the module. So once the machine is done, we will have a look at these 3 modules, three commands, how to get the details. And the first one, basically we'll just grab the lab VM details, and then we will get the connection info, Azure connection info, so we can see what's behind the Azure and what's there. And the last one would be just try to connect to the machine with the AutomatedLab VM. And it's that simple. That's our brand new Windows Server 2022 lab machine in Azure. Okay, let's move on to the next example, a more complex one. The next example shows more customizations. So we can open a new session, and I will show you that you can customize more parameters in your lab. So the lab name, of course, it's required, so you can use a variable to pass that value, but you can also change the path where your VMs are located. So in my environment, if I open this, you can see that there are multiple VMs, and this is the one we just created. So it has the disk and details about the VM. But you can change that. It doesn't have to be in the same folder. That's default. You can also put the sources in different folder. In my environment, it's all on C drive, because that's the only drive I have. Next, you can define the lab with all these extra parameters. And as you remember, you can configure the credentials as you wish. So instead of using administrator or install, I can use my name for credential, for username, and the password will be the same, just for simplicity. Next bit would be defining the ISOs. So I don't have a big number of ISOs here. It's just an OS and a SQL Server. And I added the SQL Server 2019 image definition, where I point to this location on my local lab source folder. The next bit would be to set up the network. You can set up the network based on your adapters. I'm using the Wi-Fi, so it will be created on top of my Wi-Fi adapter. You can see also here something like role. You can define role, and in my case it would be SQL Server 2019 role with extra properties. SQL Engine. This feature and SQL Engine comes from configuration ini of SQL Server installation. So when you want to install extra features like reporting services or analysis services or tools or replication, you can just put the features here. So that's the role. And I can enable that role in my VM. So my VM definition will be here. Get operating system. And this time I'm not hard coding the name. I'm just getting the name of the available operating systems in my lab sources folder. So I have 4 versions within one file. The memory limit for my VM would be 6 GB. Network would be the default switch, the one I created, and roles would be SQL Server 2019. And also tools path. That's the local folder tools with all the apps and scripts I have locally on my host that will be copied to the guest. Let's create the definition, and after 5 minutes the lab will be done. Okay, the lab is installed now. So I'm going to show you that one of the options to customize the lab is to install software on the guest machines in 4 different ways. We can install the software packages from the guest itself with the command install lab software package and the local path parameter. That will be the local folder on the guest VM. We can also install the software packages from host, where we provide the path parameter, and that path is on my laptop. And 2 other ways are using the command, invoking command, lab command. One would be to just invoke PowerShell to install Chocolatey, that we'll be using later. Chocolatey is software package management to install applications within command line. And we can also kick off start process and the installer on the guest machine in the silent mode, so we don't get any prompts and no interruptions. That's the 3rd thing. And once we get the Chocolatey installed, we can again invoke the command, but this time this command will be choco install and then whatever we want. So let's start with simple restart. We need to restart the machine first because there are some software that require the server to be restarted per installation. Let me open the machine now. It's shutting down and it's being restarted. Excellent. So that's our Windows server with SQL Server. We can see the SQL Server is installed. We can see that services of database engine are also installed and are running. Perfect. But if you want to have your lab, you might just want to have some tools. For instance, Management Studio or VS Code. None of these tools is present on the machine because we didn't install them yet. So I'm going to install some of the tools now. First, let's install the PowerShell 7 from the local path. So the local path on the machine is here. Let's go here, tools, and that is the file that we are going to install from. Let's kick this off. Maybe we will stop the restart, and let's kick the installer here. So the command I just ran creates a PowerShell job because I'm using the switch as job. So my session is available to me right now, but in the meantime there is a job on my laptop that is responsible for installing the PowerShell 7, which is currently running, and it's done. We can see PowerShell 7 is installed. So that was the software installed from within guest. Now we can install the Management Studio from my local file, local to my laptop. So let's kick this off again as a job, and it will run again. This will be a bit different because it has to download the file and then kick off the installer, but it's already doing this. Next, we are going to kick off the NuGet, Choco, and VS Code, because if you have a lab and you would like to have some IDE to develop some code or play with other programming languages, that might be very useful. So let's kick off the commands again as jobs, so we can see the confirmation that it's a remote job. It's going to be executed, and all of them end with S job. So after a while we can see the VS Code is being installed, and we just need to wait until it's done. I believe Management Studio VS Code is installed. I believe Management Studio should be installed as well. Maybe it's still in progress. Yes, probably it's in progress. So let's wait a bit. Now, one thing for Chocolatey, you can use different software package managements, but in this example I'm using Chocolatey. So for Chocolatey, it's good to restart your lab machine so it can update the environmental paths. Otherwise it won't recognize the command, the Choco command, and you won't be able to invoke the further installation. So once all the jobs are done, we can kick off the restart. Let's see if we have any jobs still running. Let's see how it goes. Yes, there is one job still running. So let's wait. Management Studio is installed, and Management Studio, SQL Server Management Studio comes with Azure Data Studio as well. So we have it now. No more jobs, so we can restart the VM once again. So that will shut the machine down, and when it's done, we will open this once again. And now the chocolatey should be ready to use. So let's see. Let's install the extensions to our VS Code. So let's have a quick look at VS Code. And there is no extensions, because that was a plain installation. There was nothing else installed, so there is no extension installed. So once we install the extensions, we should see something coming up. Let's kick this off again as a job, and then we should see Choco, the Choco process from Chocolatey that is going to install the extensions from the community repository of the software packages. Let's see, open the installed, and we can see the PowerShell is installed. And same will go for the other extension. As you can see, AutomatedLab is very easy to use. It's very powerful because it takes care of all the configurations. You don't have to think about creating separate resources in Azure, configuring the network, because every machine you configure will be connected to the internet, so you don't have to open the ports, you don't have to allow you don't have to let yourself to connect to the machine on the firewall. It will be done automatically. Same for local machines. They will be connected to the internet, and it's all set up. As you can see on their website, there are different scenarios. You can work with DSCs, even more possibilities to create labs, because DSC is something really powerful and also supported by community. And if you work with SQL Server, there is also SQL Server DSC resource support, and you can see all the different labs, scenarios, and propositions on their website. I hope you liked that little introduction, and hope it will help you to build your own labs, because it helped me a lot when I had to build a few labs myself, and it was just easy to run a few PowerShell commands, and I was running the fully functional environment. So hopefully this is something that gets broader attention and helps you to work more efficiently on your testing and all different things you do at work or test or learn. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have wonderful holiday times, and hope you enjoy the rest of the Festive Tech calendar. I wanted to thank you all the organizers for having me. This kind of events are really unique and fun, and I remember the first times when I joined them a few years ago, hoping to be there again in the future. Mikey Bronowski. If you have any questions after that, or for the about the session, or about the tool, or about anything else, find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Mikey Bronowski is my username, and you can connect, and we can chat there. Have a good day.